diverse cities in Mexico. And it's also one of the most technological and industrial cities in Mexico. So it's a newer city, and again, it's become a technological center for Mexico, for high-tech industries. And there's a lot of manufacturing plants. Mm-hmm. Many of them are U.S. manufacturing plants that moved down here. So one of the things is they talk about wanting to have more cooperative programs with us, sending students, maybe
exchange food.
Yeah, exchanges. So I would just suggest that if you're going to take a student exchange to Mexico, that you take out kidnap and ransom insurance. They actually have kidnap and ransom.
Yeah, I know. I guess if you work, I think when you work with an department, you have it automatically on.
What department?
The State Department.
Yeah.
No?
No.
They don't give you.
No.
That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Anywhere you go?
No.
What?
No kidnap and ransom. If you want it, you have to buy it yourself. And the State Department never pays ransom. So if you get kidnapped, if you don't have kidnap and ransom insurance, you're basically dead.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, but you had it, right?
No.
No?
No.
Why?
I didn't know about it. I mean,
Until after.
Until after. I used to joke with my wife. I said, if I get kidnapped, do a GPS on my phone and send a cruise missile.
That's it.
Take me and all those guys out. Take everybody out, right? That way you get the insurance,
Life insurance.
And I tell the guys too, oh, you kidnap me? It's not going to go good for you guys.
You're not going to get anything, huh?
Here it comes. Hear that jet sound? That's the cruise missile. So I was pretty impressed with this meeting. So we want to talk a little bit. This came up really interesting. Now that we have President-elect Trump,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are talking about tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to? Because a lot of people don't believe it. Oh, no, he's just saying that to get other countries to change their, policies. So he wants to scare them, saying we're going to be tariffs. And nobody really knows. But the other thing that came up is, we wanted to look at the Petit Juriste, right? Mm-hmm. This is a French legal journal. Talk a little bit about antitrust. So, you probably know that American tech industries have been hit with massive lawsuits by the EU. They've been hammering away Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook. They've all been sued by the EU for anti-competitive practices. And what does that mean? They talk about the Europeans will make the case that American companies are monopolistic. I mean, what do you guys think? Would you say that Facebook has a monopoly?
Yeah.
Because, it's the largest social media platform, even though a lot of Americans, like y'all, don't use it.
I use.
Okay. A lot of young people don't use Facebook. They tend to use Instagram.
I use it for the marketing.
Yeah. What was that? Say it again. Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that. Nate?
I was going to say, a lot of these companies do just absorb smaller companies, and it's not a good look for them in terms of keeping out those tendencies. And generally speaking, the EU kind of adds barriers as well to smaller tech companies in terms of the requirements for the GDPR. Some of this stuff can be really expensive for sex startups. So I feel like Google supports these kinds of policies to also benefit them.
Ah, interesting. That's a very interesting take. And I hadn't really looked at it that close, but I think you're onto something there. It's one thing if you're EU to say we don't want monopolies, right? We want no anti-competitive practices on the part of the big tech firms. But if you build a legal infrastructure that's so expensive for small startups to overcome, then you price them out of the market. So you, by default, you're giving a competitive advantage to the bigger companies. You can't have it both ways, right? And it seems like the Europeans maybe want to have it both ways. But some people would say that the Europeans are fond of overregulation.
Yeah.
I know, Charlie, you work over there, you work in the UK. Do people in the UK feel that that they're under-regulated or over-regulated?
I don't think either. I think people didn't really pay that much attention to GDPR.
Okay.
I think back then, especially, I don't think people really thought it was a should, because they didn't think they would get picked up by the EU, you know, that they'd actually get investigated or audited, that kind of thing. So they didn't really take it that seriously.
So there's kind of two ways of thinking, or the conversation in the United States. We'll talk about the tech industries and have my own conversations with people who work in that space. A lot of startups, even here in Houston. Houston wasn't really known as a tech hub, but now Houston's becoming a tech hub. A lot of people I know are either working for startups or out there trying to get venture capital to set up startups, which is a good thing. That kind of provides, maybe would provide opportunities for y'all, right? To maybe see opportunities there. But one of the things that I find kind of interesting is that Americans don't seem as uncomfortable with mega corporations or the big tech companies. I noticed in some of the discussion boards with you guys, there's more of a fear that overregulation would stifle innovation, the government getting involved, than there is about the abuses of monopolistic and anti-competitive practices on the part of private corporations. Americans are like, oh, we don't want the government to be too involved, because these companies, you know, even if they're big and somewhat monopolistic, they do innovate a lot. We get a lot of new goods and services out,
Yeah.
new technology, and we don't want to kind of stop that growth. And would you say that that's kind of is that a typically American mindset? That we have a greater tolerance for big companies, monopolies maybe?
I would say that it's not necessarily a public tolerance, but it's more like it's historically been there in a lot of situations. It's just kind of how things are ended up. Yeah, like Standard Oil. Like it's been here for a long time. This kind of tendencies from U.S. companies.
Yeah, so whether we extend antitrust action against big companies seems to be somewhat episodic in our history. You know, we had all the big trust companies, and Teddy Roosevelt gets in and he says, I'm going to be a trust buster. Sherman Antitrust Act comes, right? So then they broke up Standard Oil. And it's like everybody cheered, yay. And then nothing. For years and years and years, the companies were forming monopolistic practices. Then, we made this big deal of getting rid of AT&T. It used to be called Ma Bell.
Oh wait, no, Southwestern Bell.
Yeah. Well, Southwestern Bell was a piece of, they broke it up. Before that, it was just AT&T and Bell. And they had both. They had not just long distance service, but they had your domestic phone service. In fact, the first phone I ever got when I had my own place, you you would call up and they would bring you the phone.
Mm-hmm.
They wired it, and they ask you how many do you want. Do you want one on the wall, or do you want, dial phones, right? Those things weighed a ton. You could you always see people in the movie get hit on the head with the receiver because the thing was really small. But so there was one phone company for the entire country. That's it. And they did everything. They did long distance. They did residential phones. We had a phone book.
My grandma had
Everybody
those,
was
yeah.
in the book. You could find. It's amazing you can find anything in the phone book, right? But they controlled not only the phone, but they controlled the entire infrastructure. The phone lines connecting cities and everything. It was one company. And for a long time, Americans were okay with that. And then we went through one of these trust busting episodes where Congress said, this is terrible, we want to break it up. So they broke up, the AT&T was the long distance service, and then the local phone service was done by Southwestern Bell, and there was Atlantic Bell, and there was Bell Central, and Pacific Bell. They just created regional monopolies. Well, somehow that was better, I guess. They created regional monopolies, and here we go. And then, then when the internet came, the question was, how are we going to manage this? Do we want to let the phone companies get involved? Or do we want to have other internet service providers? And then the long distance service, there was a company called MCI that took over that was competing with AT&T for long distance service, and later on there was Sprint, right? Verizon started off. There was another telecom company, Vodafone, which was, I think Vodafone was either German or French. But anyway, everybody was getting into the long distance business to try to deal with the monopoly that AT&T had. And then when the internet came along, it further fragmented the market. A lot of more companies got in. Since then, there's been market consolidation for internet services through your internet service providers, right? There's not as many, right? And they tend to be, they're getting better, but for a while, if we go to talk about internet service providers, right? You got your AT&T, you got T-Mobile, you got Verizon, you got Xfinity. They tend not to, in your area, sometimes you only have one provider. Sometimes if you're lucky,
That's
you
true.
have two.
That's true.
So it's a small monopoly. I mean, if you live in a neighborhood and all you can get is Verizon, well, what competition is there? You should be able to be
they
able
tell
to
you
get all three of them.
what wires like come to your house or something. It's only AT&T or only this. Yeah.
And sometimes you can get, it's really weird. AT&T may control the infrastructure over to this pole thing, this green pole thing, but you can get Xfinity, Verizon, or AT&T to the house. They would just tap into it. So it just depends. But is that a monopoly or not? So we have one of the things that monopolization, the EU is very concerned about that. In fact, we talk about the Section 1 and 2 of the Sherman Act for the U.S., but for the EU, it's a treaty on the functioning of the European Union, there's Article 102, and based on the Lisbon Treaty in 2009, which changed a bunch of articles, but the EU and U.S. antitrust systems apply very similar standards, because some would say that the EU sort of borrowed from the Sherman Antitrust Act. Yeah.
So maybe why they're so worried about it? Do they have like a smaller middle class or something?
I don't know.
Or why would they worry about it? There's so
Well-
much other things they could worry about,
Yeah, my thinking is that there's a lot of resentment in Europe with the technological dependence that they have on U.S. systems. They're not comfortable. And so, our big companies just basically came in and steamrolled everybody.
I got it now.
provide a good service at a decent price. A lot of European companies just couldn't compete.
And so they want
just lost
to, yeah,
market share. So
that makes
now
sense.
they're trying to do something
Mm.
to create a space for their own industries to, to grow and flourish without being dominated by the American companies.
Mm.
Is that a fair characterization?
Makes sense.
What do you guys think? Because we're doing that right now. I mean, this whole thing about President-elect Trump wanting to do tariffs, he wants to return manufacturing back to the United States. So some companies are looking at, oh boy, we're going to get hit with tariffs. Maybe we start moving factories back to the United States. That's.
And isn't that what they did in the last time when he was in office too? They try to do that too again.
Some did. Some found out to their chagrin. Oh yeah, there was a big company. They were going to move to Wisconsin, and there was a big ceremony. The governor's out there. And they're all wearing the hard hats, right? And they're going to put this big chip factory, right?
I think I remember that.
And the government of Wisconsin, the governor, at the time, oh gosh, I can see him, but I can't remember. But anyway, the governor, he was going around saying, look what I've done, I brought this chip back. And they paid some incentives, and you guys won't have to pay any corporate taxes to the state for X number of years. So the company came in, and they started checking around and said, okay, we need people to work in the factory. They put out a notice, and they needed 10,000 or something, and they didn't get the workers. Because they found out for what they wanted to pay the workers, was one of the things the governor said, don't worry, we'll keep the unions out. Right? Keep the unions out, right? We'll pay you all these incentives, come in there, but this company was used to it was a Taiwanese company, was used to having factories in China. So why are they paying people in China?
Since.
Really nothing.
Since.
So then they come over to the United States and say, we're not paying that. This is what we plan to pay. And so they had this big day they were going to do people to come apply for jobs. And they needed 10,000, they had 300 people show up.
All they gotta do is go to the border.
It's
There's people there.
We're not getting the workers. And the workers were saying, not for what you want to pay us. We're not going to work for that. Prices are higher in the United States.
So.
Americans have different expectations of what they want. I want to be able to buy a house and a big truck and a fast boat and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to live in a little hovel and just, So the expectations, the company said, oh, well, you guys are not serious. And I don't know what happened, but they lost their incentives and the plant never opened. So this idea of moving all this manufacturing back to the United States, everybody cheers, yay. Okay, have you, and I could get in trouble for this, but
Whatever, nothing new.
I see all these people out, they have these rallies. They're like, yes, we're bringing them. And I look at a sea of white hair. These are all people in their 40s and 50s. They're not going to be working in those factories, right? What they need folks like y'all. They need young people. But young people in the United States don't want to do manufacturing factory work. We want to do what's called knowledge work. We want to build websites. We want to work, behind a computer. We want to do service, high-level service, intellectually stimulating work. That's what you guys want to do. So when people say, yes, we want to bring manufacturing back to the United States, it's like, well, I'm not so sure that that's the kind of work you want to do.
But you have all these immigrants at the border that are ready to work for those prices.
Of course they do. But, to to bring them in to do the work like we have for like a couple centuries. We used to do this kind of stuff. Politically, we can't do that because we've made it such a big deal that this is a bad thing, and that they're going to be stealing jobs, right? It's like
They don't want to work
wants.
it anyway. Yeah, it's
But
true.
see, we can't have that conversation.
Yeah.
I can have that conversation, and I do with my people all the time. I love to go and just like get in a group, and I just go in and throw everything in chaos. Right?
I can imagine.
But one time, somebody asked me, because I do these talks, somebody asked me, well, what about the crisis at the border?
Mm-hmm.
I said, if I were governor of Texas, I said, I'd be down there with food trucks and job applications.
Yeah.
I said, let them in. What did you used to do? Oh yeah, okay, there's a job for you, and where. I said, that's our labor shortage problem. Right
Yeah.
there. There's the solution. It's waiting for us.
Yeah.
And they're mainly young people. A lot of them have skills. I remember one time I was in New York, and I still take cabs. I was taking a cab in New York, and the guy, I said, where are you from? And he said, oh, I'm from Ghana. And I said, oh, I knew probably undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, I got an engineering degree. I said, why are you driving with the cab? He said, well, I don't have my credentials yet.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to night school to get his credentials so he can be certified in engineering. And I can't tell you how many times, I love taking cabs in like New York, Washington. I've met people who are doctors in their own countries, engineers, software developers, and all that. But we're going to night school because they've got to get the credentials. But these people are skilled.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, we got to get these guys to work. So I don't get off the soapbox. So one of the things we got with the EU that we're really concerned about, and this is if you want to go to that site, antitrust. So I think that this is aspirational. What do I mean by aspirational? I'm not so sure, and I'm going to throw this out to you all. I'm not so sure that you can have effective antitrust legislation in the face of how big and powerful the tech industry is now. I don't know how you break them up. I mean, I guess it's feasible. You can have, let's pick on Facebook, because I love to pick on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook and Microsoft are people I like to attack. But I think, Nathan, you mentioned, and Charlie both mentioned when Facebook took over Instagram, they kind of crossed that line into being a monopoly. Could we disentangle Facebook and Instagram now?
I would say that it would be difficult, but it's not only the absorption of Instagram, it's also like the way they with data. Like there's certain ways they can do data and make money off of it. They control a lot of these companies, and that also is a big monopoly to have in the market. They can sell services to other companies.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider when making a part of Facebook, or even other companies. Like maybe Amazon is another company that could be considered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd love
Amazon.
to go after Amazon with a big old sledgehammer.
And I think that everything in both the companies are made for convenience.
Yeah.
So if you're using Facebook, whatever you uploaded there, it's already uploaded on Instagram for you. It's convenient. You don't have to do it here and then go log in here and do it. It's automatically, seamlessly. So I think that that's what might be something that a lot of it's convenience. Everything is around convenience. All Americans want everything convenient. Even Amazon, everything that you're talking about, it's already there conveniently for you. The Nikes you were just talking about, it's convenience. It's all aimed to convenience.
I don't have an Amazon account either.
No? You don't use Amazon Prime or?
No.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, I did a couple things, but I didn't want to make an account. Then I read their terms of service. And then I thought about it, and I thought, well, let me just And now I just never got one.
You never order anything online?
No, I
eBay?
order online, but I don't order from Amazon.
What do you order from?
Well, there's a bunch of different organizations. Depends on what if I order books, I might go to Thrift Books, I might go to Half Price Books, I might go to Barnes and Noble.
And it's probably cheaper on Amazon.
No.
No?
The price, I checked, the price
Oh,
is
okay.
usually the exact same, down to the penny.
Really?
It's the same cost, yeah.
Hmm.
Sometimes if I order electronics, usually I like to go to Micro Center or something. I like to touch my electronics. I don't
Yeah.
like to order online. But if I do order online, I either go directly to the manufacturer or order to Best Buy or something like that. So, I found that I can get along quite well without Amazon or Walmart. I don't order anything from Walmart. That's just me. So, again, I don't like those big monopolistic kind of thing. I even sometimes go to small business websites and order stuff directly from small businesses. I even call on their phones and talk to them. Hey, how you doing? Hey, that's all your stuff. Oh, really? Yeah. So there's these. Okay, so like my belt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is called Rainbow something. They're Native Americans from Washington State, and if you want to have an enjoyable time, calling these guys is always entertaining. Because it's like 5 or 6 guys that cast this stuff, they polish it.
Handmade.
Everything's handmade, right? So when I order a belt, it takes weeks to get to me, right? And I call them up, I said, hey, remember so-and-so like that? Oh, wait a minute. Come back here, hey, remember?
They see your history.
Come
Yeah.
back. Where are you from? What's your name? What's that guy from Texas? Oh, yeah. He's working on it now. And then we talk a little bit. How's the elk-hunting season? Oh, well, we're out getting salmon now. So, small business. I like to support small business.
Yeah.
So again, one of the things, here's the interesting thing for antitrust violations, and this is in the U.S. There's a lot of people feel that as the tech industry has gotten bigger and more powerful, there's been less appetite inside the Justice Department to take them on for antitrust violations. Why do you think? Now the EU's, we'll talk about, the EU doesn't have that problem. The U.S., our Justice Department has been very reluctant to take on big tech.
Because they bring in so much money.
Absolutely. The legal costs, these big companies have figured out they can bottle up the litigation for years, if not decades. And all that time, the Justice Department is spending money. They're having to put extra lawyers on this. They have to go through discovery. They have to try to get evidence, maybe get somebody to testify. And it goes from one court to the other. And even if the big companies lose at the trial court level, they will always appeal. And usually appellate courts in the United States, I love it. So usually in a trial court, they get you all on the jury. They get you all inflamed, upset about how much these companies are making and how bad the service is and how much. So most juries will award huge damages. They will for anti-competitive practices. They call for companies to be broken up on. Let's get to the appellate court. Most appellate courts want to see a settlement. So they'll tell the Justice Department, you guys need to work this out. Because there's a lot of technical documents that the companies submit. Judges have to read through. Judges may not have the expertise. They bring in experts. They testify. And usually at the appellate court, even if the big tech company loses, the damages are slashed. Sometimes they're only asked to pay 25 cents on the dollar, right? So there's huge retrenchment back on the awards if there's a fine. So even though the definitions of monopoly are about the same in both countries, and then thinking loosely. Yeah.
I also think that also because maybe they have learned from their past, and I see that they're always updating their policies so that they do stay on the lines of the laws here, I think, also.
So the law kind of is a moving target in its interpretation. So this is going to come up, this is actually going to be hotly contested in the courts. And it looks like the courts are taking us all into the sort of a legal black hole. So for decades and decades, there was it's called the Chevron decision, which was recently overturned by the Supreme Court, and everybody's trying to figure out, oh my God, what this means. So just to give you a little legal background. So in the decision years ago, 30 years ago, not more, maybe 50 years ago, the court said, listen, Congress makes laws, right? But the laws sometimes are general and broad in scope. Then there's usually a delegation of authority in the law. Congress says they leave it to the executive department to determine the regulations upon which the law will be enforced. The interpretation of how you enforce the law is left to the executive agency. So say it's a law having to do with the internet, and the delegation authority, say the Congress delegates the authority of the Department of the Commerce Federal Communications Commission to come up with regulations about how the language of the law is to be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys do that, because you have the expertise, we don't have the expertise.
Mm-hmm.
This is what our intention is, but you guys got all these scientists and engineers, and there's NIST and all that. Figure it out. And so NIST will then propose a regulation, the Department of Commerce will propose a regulation, everybody proposes a regulation. They send it out for a 30-day comment period. People like y'all can read the regulation, you can comment, you guys can, your comments can be part of the consideration for the regulation. Average citizens can do that. And there's a lot of people who do that. There's maybe universities, maybe University of St. Thomas might want to do that. A collective will go and say, hey, this is what we think the regulation ought to say. Or this is what the problem, take this out. Be a problem. So it goes for a 30-day comment period. They then do another draft of the legislation, of the regulation, very careful. Then they send it out again. And usually when they include all the comments, they kind of cut and splice it. Goes out again for a final comment, right? And then, depending on what the response is, they come up with a final rule. They usually give, the rule takes effect like within anywhere from 30 to 90 days. They let Congress know, here's what we plan on doing, guys. We don't have a problem with it. So what Congress did recently with Chevron is that there was these things always go to pieces on a stupid case, I should call it. Okay, so here's the deal. There was some regulation about fishing. About the size of the fish.
Oh, okay.
Right? If you're going off.
Mm-hmm.
There's a regulation of the catch. And Department of Commerce, I can't remember which little subgroup, but they said, okay, we have to go out and periodically check the fish. Make sure that the fishing boats aren't catching too many small fish. And so,
But I think they've done that for a long time, though, I think.
yeah, they have, but somebody complained. So what they said is, okay, Mr. Fisher person, right? You gotta take one of these inspectors out on the boat with you. The inspector will be out there, we can bring in the nets, they will help measure the fish.
Oh my God.
And if you're not throwing back the little ones, like according to the regulation,
Well, and of course it's going to do it in front of him.
right? And you don't have the right kind of nets and all this kind of stuff, then you can get fined.
That's messed up.
So the fishermen said, this is ridiculous. Now they've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah, that's a
But
long time.
now it's ridiculous. We don't want, because they've noticed that there's been a change in the way the courts are looking at this. This new Supreme Court was waiting for a test case so they could throw. So there's been a couple. There was one having to do with the EPA in Louisiana. There's been a few cases where the Supreme Court has said the federal government, federal agencies are guilty of overreach. Right? Congress should decide what the regulations are, not the federal agencies. Even though Congress delegated that authority to the regulations in the original statute. But the Supreme Court, so they threw out the Chevron. The Chevron case basically says when there's a challenge, the court should side with the federal agencies because they have the experts and they've tested this thing out and they did the whole regulatory, the comments and all that. So we might as well go with it. Courts should not get involved in second guessing the federal agencies. That's gone now. And everybody's kind of like, okay, so how far? Because there's hundreds of laws and regulations, hundreds of laws that could be thrown out, where they said, Congress, you have to go back and rewrite the law to include all that regulatory language. Hundreds of laws.
Yeah.
So everybody's kind of, what does this mean? So the question comes up for our purposes, and again, that's on the U.S. side, has nothing to do with what's going on in the EU. But the question is, right, the whole way the statutory authority of executive power, executive branches. So in the EU, you have legislation, right, the GDPR, but in the EU, you have a collective executive, the European Commission. And the European Commission has a lot of power to make those determinations. So this is there was a question about, again, big tech. So this Professor Dr. Anna Gorbrandi, right, Gorbrandi of the Chair of Competition Law, Europa Institute, Utrecht University, that's in the Netherlands. She wants to see EU apply their competition law for anti-competitive practices applied to big tech. And she offers that the scope of modern technology companies. He said it's actually it's something new. And that governments are at a disadvantage to deal with it. And one of the reasons is how just the enormous size of these companies and what an impact, how dependent our modern society is on these companies. So, how big are they? Many of the tech companies operate as gatekeepers. This is one of the things she's concerned about, is gatekeepers to the market. They all say free market. She says that's not free. Because you can't get into the market without going through an ISP, your internet service provider. You have to go through Google, you have to go through Microsoft Edge, you have to go through one of these to access the market. And when you're going through this portal, they're hitting you with all this advertising. You go through and beat you on the head with advertising as you're trying to get through. Like, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? So, so do you guys use some of the other browsers, gateways? Okay. I mean, like, some people use DuckDuckGo, Mozilla. I'm a big
Yeah, Tor, Tor. Candle, yeah.
You know, there's others you can use. Brave's another one. You know, so
Opera, yeah.
there's a bunch of other ones, but I would say even then you have to go through AT&T, Verizon, Xfinity, or something to get out there. You may use a different browser, but you know the line is controlled by one of these internet service providers that big companies.
Like T-Mobile, they have hotspots too.
T-Mobile. So it's kind of a different kind of system that we're working with, and makes regulating it very difficult. Of course, you know, she calls the big five are her concern: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook, which is not bad. So how do we deal with the big five? They've such control. So she talks about that these companies are so big, and her concern is things that she calls market values need to be aligned with non-market values. Non-market values, things like freedom, fairness, solidarity, and sustainability. So what does that even mean? What does freedom mean? Everybody throws out freedom. Oh, what does it mean? Does it mean different things to different people?
Yeah.
Anybody want to talk about freedom? Doesn't mean do anything you want within reason. Because a lot of people have different. I've seen this the whole free speech stuff. Let's talk about that for a little bit. The whole free speech argument. Should anyone be able to post anything they want? Anything? Are there any free speech absolutists here? Hands up. No? What kind of speech shouldn't be allowed? By the government? Because we have a First Amendment. Government's much more restricted in what it can prevent or censor than private sector. Private sector, okay, a lot more.
I would say hate speech.
Hate speech? We got hate speech?
Explicit content.
Explicit, you mean like sexually explicit? Explicit content?
Violence.
Misinformation, okay. Misinformation, ooh, what's that mean?
I don't know about misinformation, only because whatever it is people put out there, it doesn't mean you have to believe it. It can be regular speech that someone's not telling the truth anyway. So that would be censoring almost everything.
Misinformation, so are sexually explicit stuff, or do we have kind of consensus around that?
Yeah.
Views? I'm not seeing yes, no, maybe, and maybe.
I was gonna say hate crime earlier, but you said hate speech.
Okay, so hate speech, sexually explicit stuff, are we uncomfortable with that? We want to restrict that? A lot of times the conversation about sexually explicit is age determined. So for minors, yes, everybody thinks kids should not have access to that. But then there are other people think, well, if you're an adult, you should be able to, privacy of your own home, but who's got privacy, right? being monitored, everything you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be able to access it if you're an adult. That's an argument. Not advocating one way or the other. So, should it be age determined?
I mean, it's kind of like drinking, like you can't
Right.
drink before 21.
Well, you should. It's illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of different, I don't know.
Right. Believe me, you know, Sacramento wine, does that count?
Mm-hmm.
Does that count? Can you have Sacramento wine? if you're
Right.
21? I mean, I've never seen like Texas Alcohol Beverage Control break into a church,
Mm-mm.
drag people off because a little kid took a sip of a wine cup,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's technically illegal. So what do you guys think? I mean, come on now. What should we?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think there needs to be an emphasis on certain things that are harmful for, calling for the things. It's really interesting in the space online because the amount of, first of all, the amount of bot content has actually surpassed like human content on the internet. So that makes things like infinitely more hard. Like nobody, it's a complete like vacuum of like no control. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
now the bots are taking over. So
Mhm.
censorship, that it's not really fully possible. There's still bad things on the internet no matter what. And these platforms should take it seriously. They have to be doing that. When it comes to like hate speech or explicit content, like you guys said, and I'm sure there's more like collective violence, corrective violence in circumstances, right? But it's a really complicated space, and it's going to require almost kind of like entirely new government organization with like a supercomputer, like you can start to tackle this stuff.
AI and supercomputers.
Quantum, yeah.
Yeah, being the cop on the beat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold that thought. That's because we are in a new space. Rapidly, we are moving so fast into a new. Some people are calling this the fifth industrial revolution. Because I think the first was back in the 1820s, and then steam power and all that. And then we had the fourth had to do with the transistor, electronics, but again the transistor, miniaturization. The fourth industrial revolution was the internet. And the fifth industrial revolution is AI. So,
Would you say AI and AR are very in that
yeah,
sense?
also
Because
the reality.
in like 10 or 15 years, we might like use phones and just go strictly to AR and to completely take over.
Well, I don't know. See me up in the morning, you wouldn't want to go there.
Well, no, they have like,
And then
well,
I
no, they have like
I
glasses.
have my persona,
Yeah.
who's always looking good, nice haircut, in a suit, and that would be the one talking to you. And then the guy who just got out of bed, he wants to.
Well, no, like, like an AR, like he's talking about, would be like, you wouldn't come to this classroom. You'd be going like to the metaverse, and you'd be teaching there in the metaverse, and we'd all come meet you in that group there. That would be the new school.
Or there's even like, as
Yeah.
far as like already building an industrial plan
Right.
with like HoloLens too, which is like from Microsoft,
Okay.
which is like kind of like virtual reality,
Yeah.
in like a workspace environment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is like very, very technical, very far.
Now, how much power does it take to create these things? How much computing power are we talking about? And computing power needs electricity.
Well, not too much, because the glasses you're wearing, same thing is an AR. It can be an
But what did it take to manufacture that?
I don't know, not too
What
much.
kind of rare earth materials? See, there's this supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
We never think of the supply chain. We only think of the end product. And I get to, this is where I get into these arguments. Like, they tell me, oh, it's so much more efficient. I said, no, it's not. You have to count the entire supply chain. The rare earths that are mined in China, that are put on a boat, that goes across the ocean, that dumps them, that actually dumps them in another country where they make some of the components, maybe in Mexico, those components that come across the United States are made by robots. How were the robots made? Where were they made? What kind of alloys were used to create the robot? When you start talking the entire supply chain, it's a huge network. It's a huge conglomeration of industries that have to work together to get to those nice little glasses.
But it would have been, you're not going to use a phone anymore. You're not going to use a laptop anymore. You're not going to have to use headphones anymore. Everything happens in the glasses.
Okay.
So it'd be like just making one item
Okay.
instead of 5 different
Okay.
items. I'm just saying. I don't care
No,
either
but
way.
this
No, I'm
is
saying.
this is the kind of conversation we have to have. And going back to who's doing that, what companies are doing that, would there be a lot of small startups in that space? Or are we looking
Yeah.
at to bring together all those technologies in that whole supply chain? Does it necessitate that we have mega corporations like Meta and Microsoft
Yes.
and Amazon? I mean, are we at the point where we really can't have a lot of small little startups to pull all that technology together and that supply chain together? We kind of have to have mega corporations, or in the case of China, a huge government. I mean, I'm asking the question.
Well, and if everything was moved on to like a platform like that, which some of it's already happening, people are buying land, people are buying houses on there, people are already working, like, and they're getting money. They're getting like job money every day. They're getting paid on that, and on the platform like Metaverse. Like you go there, you work there, you come home, you have a house, you have a car. Everything is in this virtual reality. No. But it would just say no. But it would just say it would make like
You're
schools
still going to have to live as an
obsolete.
organic being.
It would make schools and other kinds of jobs obsolete because you do everything there. You wouldn't have to travel. Wouldn't have to leave your home. That would be something. That would only be like power and yeah.
You know me,
Well, I mean the internet because it's probably chargeable. So the internet at least. Yeah.
So anyway, so there's this counterpoint I want to talk about. This.
He raised his hand on there
Yes,
too.
who's hand?
Nate.
Nate.
I honestly forgot my point because I was listening to what you guys were saying.
Okay, next time just jump in.
Okay, sounds good.
So this is a debate whether this is good or bad. And I hate good or bad debate because it's always in the middle somewhere. There's some good things about it, there's some bad things about it. There's some people who are going to thrive in that environment, and some people like me are going to like.
It's all right. I'll help you. I'll help you, Eric. I'll help you.
I'll write it off.
Don't worry. I'll help you.
I'm about there.
I'll help you.
I'm looking at somebody.
I'll push the cart for you. No problem.
Okay. So there's a lot of people that are saying, listen, we've got to stop resisting this. We've got to stop worrying about whether these companies are too big and just embrace. I have people that you can embrace AI. You got to learn to live with it. It's a new economy. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like you were talking about market barrier being high, and I mentioned that related to certain like regulation issues, but in general, the market barrier to entry in the market is growing significantly, right? So China has government support, the US has had government support, financial crises, and these huge corporations just have like a huge financial backbone that allows them to continue to move forward, like expand, right?
Right.
You kind of need that nowadays. It seems like, or you need a lot of funding to just market the right?
So you make a good point in that, and I hear technologists talk about this. They said, China is throwing incredible amounts of money at quantum computing, at building the infrastructure, developing their technology with certain standards. Huawei, it was 5G, now it's 6G, and all this kind of stuff. And if the U.S. government is going to not be a direct investor into that technological infrastructure, then it needs to get out of the way and let big tech do it. Because either we're going to have the infrastructure and protocols that are compatible with our system and our values, or the Chinese are just going to dominate the market and everybody's going to buy from China. So the U.S. government is going to dive into that market then it should just get out of the way and let big tech do it and support big tech in that endeavor. So what do y'all think? I mean, is that a reasonable argument?
I mean, I would have to agree in some ways because when he did technologically move forward, but I also think the U.S. government should continue like investing, like as people look at it like socialism, but in the point where the economy is getting beat up by China to move away, and the U.S. was stepped out in terms of its research and development units, and now a lot of things are going to private companies. I mean, I think the U.S. is in a good place still because like we have NVIDIA, which is sort of
Oh, yeah.
company, and they're growing like crazy, and they have some of the best technology I'm sure they're sharing with the military that we have no clue about, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's the argument I hear most when I talk to technologists outside of, outside the classroom. That everyone appreciates that it was DARPA and the government that got the internet rolling. They really appreciated that. Government did a lot of the seed capital. They developed a lot of the early protocols. Then it was picked up by private companies, private researchers. Internet went to www and Tim Berners-Lee and all those people. And then it just exploded. Once the government essentially gave that technology to the private sector. Same thing with GPS. It started out as a government thing. Then it was kind of like given to everybody to use. And it really, so that model of the government providing at critical points some seed capital and then partnering with the private sector, and then once it takes off, getting out of the way, not having a heavy hand on the regulations. So a lot of people are comfortable with that model. The only thing that they're sometimes uncomfortable with is there's this desire for the tech companies to be a little bit more responsible, right? It's like, especially when we're talking about things like deepfakes and just
continuing moderations on it.
Right,
As the
yeah.
government wouldn't continue moderate
right.
anymore.
So this idea of content moderation, people are still uncomfortable about having the government directly censor. They want the private sector companies to be a little bit more responsible. This is an easy one. They do it in a lot of other areas where private sector companies form an industry council. I don't know why this hasn't happened. Maybe it hasn't, I've just been asleep. But they usually would form an industry council. This happened in the chemical industry, and a lot of industries where they've said, okay, we're tired of chemical plants blowing up and killing people, let's sit down and figure out safety.
Yeah.
So the industry gets together, they got experts, they got smart people, and they say, okay, these are some standards we'll all adopt across the industry. Best practices. And they put them in place, and then the industry goes to the Congress, Congress, can you make this a law? So that everybody's doing it. Congress is okay. We've done the heavy lifting for you. We figured out all the technical stuff. We're an industry. We know how to do this. We don't want to kill our people, right? So make this a law. And then the legislation comes through, and the industry feels okay because they're already doing it. So it'd be very easy for the tech industry, for internet, for social media and all that, to create an industry council, come up with best practices, all of them agree to do it, right? And then turn around and say, okay, government, make this a law.
Yeah.
We're already complying, and the outliers, the companies that don't want to behave responsibly, don't go after them. Don't go after us. We're doing this the right way.
That sounds good.
To me, what do you
Yeah.
guys think?
Sounds good. Perfect.
I'm just surprised it hasn't happened yet. Maybe we could start that. University of St. Thomas will get together a working group and put it out, publish it.
That's good.
What do you think? Should we do that?
Yeah.
So this is some. Huh? Go for it.
Maybe it's possible, but we have also, it's a bit of complicated, maybe one of the industries like target like a different sector of like the internet, right?
Right.
So maybe they have different things that they want on the table, and like completely different, like Amazon and Facebook. They're not even looking at like the same kind of data probably, which are like target data development,
Right.
It's probably really complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
So you could actually have an industry council that would be segmented for the different types of services and products they provide. And each working group would come up with a set of best practices. Anyway, so this is kind of right at the beginning of COVID, this came out. But if you look at the market capitalization, right? So you have Alphabet, Google, right? You have Facebook. And this was old money. This is 2021, so 3 years later, I'm sure these numbers are a lot higher. And then we don't even have, well, actually, X doesn't make that much money. He still hasn't made a profit. That was the last data I saw on that. But
What year?
It's not about profit. Elon Musk is about in sort of spreading his message
Exactly.
and promoting himself.
Exactly.
So it's money well spent. Right. Right. Yeah, I got a sneaking suspicion. I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day if they come up with some crazy idea to get rid of NASA and replace it with SpaceX.
Right?
No, I would
No.
not be surprised.
I mean, maybe I could see them join. I don't know about getting rid of.
I wouldn't be surprised. Right?
All right? At least I think they would join
Things are
now.
gonna get weird.
As if the Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE sees
Right.
NASA, is they're going to replace the industry.
Yeah.
That's
I
think.
So y'all are probably too young to remember. But before Dick Cheney became Vice President of the United States, before he appointed himself Vice President, co-president under W, he was Secretary of Defense under Secretary of Defense, the Reagan. I'm trying to remember. He had it. Maybe he was under Secretary of Defense or Secretary of Defense for a short while, but he was a member of Congress. And then for a while he worked for Halliburton. He was the CEO of Halliburton. And Halliburton had a subsidiary called Kellogg Brown and Root, KBR. And so he supposedly did this big survey. He did this thing, this study, saying that the military, there was a time when the military ran its own food services. They had mess halls, or military people that made the food and people, right? The military did all the logistics. When it built a base, it was military engineers and military guys driving the bulldozers and all that. Okay, so the military did all. And Dick Cheney said it would be cheaper. He led this study. It would be cheaper if all that were contracted out to private sector. We don't need, the military should not do that. So they said, okay, fine. So then what happened is the company he worked for got all the contracts, KBR, building bases, and food services, so all the money that used to go, it stayed in the Defense Department and paid soldiers to do that. A lot of times reserve. Now went to private contractors that paid Kellogg Brown and this alphabet soup of companies that started doing all these services for the Department of Defense. So the money went to the private sector. A lot of money. At one point, it was made up of a huge portion of the overall defense budget. I can see in the future where this new Department of Government Efficiency basically goes in and dismantles most of the federal government and then outsources almost all those services to private companies. I can see that being, it's going to be more efficient. They say it's going to be more efficient. And, maybe NASA, buy NASA. Maybe also human services, right? Maybe the National Weather Service gets
I don't know,
about
but
the
it,
happy weather.
but that's how they get all their income, though. You know what I mean?
So I could see that that's another direction we're going to go, is massive privatization of government services to different companies. In the name of efficiency.
Maybe.
So the question is that a good thing or bad thing? Well, so quickly, we don't have a whole lot of time left, just 5 minutes. So the EU took on Microsoft. This was back in 2007, so quite a while ago. I remember the hysteria almost in the EU about Microsoft's market dominance, that Microsoft had destroyed up-and-coming European companies that are trying to develop operating systems. I think one of them was Olivetti, was an Italian company that was trying to build an operating system, and they just got steamrolled. There's never really got out of the R&D too. Do you all remember that, John? Do you remember Olivetti was trying to do an operating system?
I don't remember that. No.
Well, it didn't get very far.
Yeah.
And the Italian government was all upset because they were kind of giving them a little seed money, but it didn't go anywhere. And I don't even know if they're still around anymore.
Never heard of it.
So anyway, Microsoft got hit with a big fine, $611 million. And the fines that they're talking about now are dwarfed at unbelievable. So Google got fined 1.49 billion euros. And Google's being hit again. Microsoft's being hit again. They're talking Microsoft fines this time might be as high as 6 billion euros. That's some serious money, right? Because they said they're repeat offenders. They're going after Google again. Facebook was fined. Facebook looks like they're going to get hit with some more serious fine. Because the way the GDPR works, every time you're found in violation of anti-competitive practices, if you've been fined before, then the fines ratchet up. And so these organizations keep getting hit, right, with these fines. They claim it's unfair. Now, in the
My
past,
problem is that they
yeah.
tend, especially when I'm picking up Microsoft, they tend to pass the cost on to the consumer, and it ends up the consumer paying for the fine, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That's the tendency. They look at it as, for them, maintaining market dominance is an imperative. They have to keep it. And these fines are just the cost of doing business. And you're right, they pass the losses on to the consumer. They have a friend in Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump has threatened to retaliate against the EU if they go after our big tech. Either with tariffs or something. So it's going to be interesting to see if they move forward with some of these fines and continue to attack big tech companies, facing a new administration who may decide to retaliate against them. So we could see a really, really nasty trade war. Oh, we'll be at war with everything.
Trump coming in.
Yeah. So any thoughts, final thoughts in our minute left? I like this idea of a working group to, think about best practices. I think it's probably more viable than trying to get